After 10 years of marriage to the man I loved, he still got my name wrong. Helen, don't leave me. He would call out each night during our intimate moments, but my name was Haley. Helen was his first love. If you need any compensation, just talk to my lawyer, he said nonchalantly when we divorced. I packed all my essentials into a single bag and booked a flight for the next day. Marcus lounged on the sofa, his body marked with bites from the night before. Helen had come back, and he was overjoyed. Not long after, news of a plane crash spread across the city. Marcus completely broke down. I had missed that flight because I stayed behind for an extra piece of fried chicken. 2 hours later, my mother was the first to hear about the crash. Are you out of your mind? Do you even care that I'm your mother? She yelled. Despite her panic, she insisted on taking me to see a doctor. She seemed happier about my divorce than anyone else. Last month, Helen's return made headlines. Marcus personally went to meet her at the airport. Photos from the media showed her smiling sweetly, her head resting gently on his shoulder. A faint kiss mark was visible on his cheek. Fans celebrated the perfect match, a famous singer and a corporate executive. Garbage, absolute trash. What a waste of attention. My mother muttered angrily on the way to the hospital. I couldn't tell if she was furious at me or Marcus. Her conflicting emotions left me baffled. She kept flipping my divorce certificate in her hands. A lump formed in my throat. The car jolted, and I suddenly felt sick. Strange. I had never been carsick before. My mother's face hardened the moment she noticed. A month ago, on the night Marcus picked up Helen at the airport, I lay in our massive bed, relieved he wouldn't return. But in the middle of the night, I was awakened by cold lips on mine. Sorry, did I wake you? He asked politely. I tried to sit up, still groggy, but he pressed me back down. I thought you weren't coming back, I said. Marcus usually avoided drinking, but that night, the scent of alcohol mixed with a strange perfume. Ignoring my protests, he kissed me again. His skin burned where it touched mine, sweat soon slicking between us. Wait, we haven't used that? I began, but Marcus let out an annoyed grunt and reached for the drawer. Silence. When did they run out? He asked. Yesterday, or maybe the day before. Sorry, I forgot. His body grew hotter, brushing off my excuse. Just this once, it'll be fine. Rain fell softly outside. The next morning, he left to have breakfast with Helen, and I wondered if he noticed the damp spot on my pillow. The baby's vital signs look good. Congratulations. The doctor stopped short, perhaps sensing my mother's icy glare. What are you planning to do? She asked. I placed my hand on my stomach, breathing steadily. This was my first child. Meanwhile, news of Marcus and Helen's Las Vegas vacation flooded social media. I saw Helen's latest post, 10 years together, and we're still strong. The photo showed their hands intertwined, engagement rings glimmering in the sunlight. Marcus had once promised to take me to Las Vegas, too. He always claimed he was too busy with work and that rings were inconvenient. It seemed ridiculous now. My mother, noticing my silence, sighed in resignation. Fine, if you want to have the baby, go ahead. At least I'll have someone to keep me company. She had fought against my marriage to Marcus from the start, knowing his heart wasn't with me. But I'd been too deeply in love. Maybe time had softened her stance. The doctor picked up a pen. I'll prescribe prenatal vitamins. Make sure to watch your diet. No need. I'm ending it. The sooner, the better. I ran my hand over my belly, my voice soft. Today is my birthday. Before leaving New York, I stopped by the photo studio to collect the portraits I had taken for my birthday. It was a farewell gift to myself, marking the end of an era. Marcus had promised to join me for the shoot, but halfway through, he left after receiving a message from Helen. Helen has a fever. She's alone overseas, and I'm worried about her. Helen, Haley, our names were so alike. No wonder Marcus froze when he first saw our marriage certificate. Ma'am, here are your photos, the clerk said. As she handed me the package, a file slipped from her grasp. Wedding photos spilled onto the floor. My heart clenched, a dull ache spreading in my chest. The groom in the pictures was Marcus, but the beautiful bride was someone else. In that moment, I finally understood why people said I resembled Helen. The way I smiled bore an uncanny resemblance to her expression. "I'm so sorry," the clerk muttered, hastily picking up the photos. The manager rushed over, apologizing profusely. The pictures were part of a special order for Marcus, taken years ago. The date printed below revealed that while I was having my birthday shoot, he had arranged a session for them at an overseas branch. "I'll take my photos now," I said, brushing it off. Under the sympathetic stares of the staff, I walked out. "Are you really giving up on this baby?" My mother's voice broke through my thoughts. Her disbelief was palpable. I was resolute. This was Marcus's child, but my mother likely thought I'd cling to him no matter what. "I'm divorced, Mom. It's over." As I entered the operating room, I caught a glimpse of her discreetly wiping away tears with her sleeve. On the nearby television, breaking news about the plane crash played. Everyone assumed I'd been on that flight, except my mother. It was Marcus who had booked my ticket in such a hurry. Marcus had seemed bewildered by my determination right after we finalized the divorce. I was the one who had filed for it. "I've sent you my account details. Don't forget to transfer the money." I packed a small bag of essentials and glanced at the man I'd shared a bed with for a decade. His neck still bore the marks from the previous night. "Since Helen's back, living together would have been awkward anyway," he remarked, his tone provoking me. But my heart had already gone numb. Helen, Haley. Even when booking my flight, he'd unconsciously typed her name instead of mine. "It's Haley," I corrected icily. Perhaps feeling the discomfort, Marcus suggested we have one last meal at the Chinese restaurant I'd always wanted to try. But his phone rang, and a sweet, delicate voice filled the air. "Marcus, that restaurant you took me to last time was wonderful. Can we go again tonight? And why not bring Haley? I'd love to see how much she looks like me." Marcus acted as though I didn't exist. "Sure, I'll meet you later. She doesn't need to come. Once I move in, I'll ask her to make soup for you. You'll love it." He sounded so confident I'd come crawling back, ready to obey at a moment's notice, as if I were nothing more than a bedmate who could cook soup well. The thought was absurd. Without looking at him, I grabbed my umbrella and left. Pushing open the door was like tossing a stone into a still lake. You expect ripples or waves, but all you get is cold, indifferent silence. My hands felt numb, my steps unsteady, as I walked into the rain with no clear destination. Haley. Haley. My tears were almost gone. Helen had always been the woman Marcus cherished most. He had once sworn he would marry no one but her, even willing to cut ties with his family and give up the family business for her. But when it mattered most, Helen chose to pursue her dreams abroad. Wait for me a little longer. That was the first time Marcus drank, stumbling into my mother's small restaurant, reeking of alcohol and heartbreak. "What smells so good?" he asked. "I just made some soup." I recognized him immediately, my heart pounding. This was the boy who had filled my dreams for 3 years. "Have some. It'll help with the hangover." "What's your name?" "Why, Haley." His gaze, though hazy, froze when he saw me. The steam from the soup swirled between us, the hum of cars audible outside. My mother always said I had a knack for picking men out of the trash. What? Just because he held an umbrella for you? Your love is worthless. If Marcus's family disapproved of Helen, they certainly wouldn't have accepted me. That night, Marcus hurriedly finished the soup and left, his cheeks flushed. I thought it was love. The next day, he sent me a text, and the day after that, we got married. When my mother found out, she chased me with a kitchen knife. He doesn't love you. Her despair was almost laughable, but my heart had been stolen 3 years prior. During a rainstorm, when Marcus had lent me his jacket and umbrella after I'd faced an embarrassing situation. That storm drenched 10 years of my life. Marcus's family was unhappy, but grudgingly accepted it. The eldest son married a restaurant owner's daughter. They sneered. What did you drug him with? At our wedding, an admirer of Marcus's threw a glass of red wine on me, soaking me from head to toe. Marcus just stood there, watching coldly. If Helen hadn't left, it wouldn't be your turn, she hissed. A stand-in for his first love? How cliché. The mention of Helen always sparked the only emotion Marcus showed. Enough! This has nothing to do with Helen, he snapped, defending her while I stood there, humiliated, red wine dripping off my arms and face. The slideshow displayed the bride's name as Helen, and laughter filled the room. I was thankful my mother hadn't attended. Otherwise, Marcus might have left the wedding with a broken limb. She always told me, all I want is for you to be safe and happy. It wasn't too late. When I exited the operating room, it felt like waking from a long, deep sleep. My mother sat nearby, peeling an orange. Wipe your tears, she said, offering a tissue. I ignored it, placing my hands over my stomach and steadying my breath. Marcus's phone rang repeatedly on the bedside table. Neither of us reached for it. The ringtone echoed relentlessly. My mother finally broke the silence. What are you thinking? I want to go home. Are you sure? I want to go home. This time, I mean it. After running in circles for over a decade, I was exhausted. Helen's posts about her perfect romance had stopped. Meanwhile, Marcus had sent me hundreds of messages within an hour. Why won't you answer? You weren't on that flight, were you? Don't mess with me. I'm warning you, you won't like what happens if you do this. You just want to stay by my side, don't you? Is disappearing really necessary? Even Helen messaged me, Marcus and I will come see you soon. Thank you for taking care of him all these years. Honestly, I was baffled. The rumors said Helen had been in a committed relationship overseas for a long time. Why had she come back suddenly? And why wasn't she angry or upset when she saw the marks I had left on Marcus? Within an hour, Marcus's family business announced Helen as their new partner. At the same time, the divorce settlement Marcus promised was deposited directly into my mother's account. In the Marcus Group's company chat, Helen received a warm welcome as the new shareholder. News of my divorce spread quickly, and colleagues whispered among themselves, when will they get married? Considering the buzz around their engagement rings, the wedding was expected to be an extravagant affair. Yet, strangely, Helen stopped updating her social media about their relationship after that dinner at the Chinese restaurant. Soon, there were whispers at work that Marcus hadn't shown up at the office in ages. Is your ex-husband coming to find you? My mom asked while chopping dumpling filling, her tone full of curiosity. I'm not that important. Besides, everything's perfect for him now. Career and love in perfect balance. Mom snorted. Then why is he still texting you every day? She had a point. The messages were predictable. At first, they were aggressive demands for me to return. Gradually, they turned desperate and pleading. Then, on the small TV in the restaurant, breaking news aired. Marcus Group chairman donates millions to investigate Weinstein plane crash. Sources say his ex-wife may have been a passenger. With Marcus's resources and influence, he could have easily confirmed I wasn't on that flight. But someone had clearly kept him in the dark, feeding him misinformation. Haley, do you remember where I put the headache medicine? Thank goodness text messages don't show red receipts. In the company chat, people kept asking, "When's the wedding? We need to witness this epic love story." Some nosy colleagues kept the chatter going, but before Marcus or Helen could respond, those users were quietly removed from the group. After Helen joined the company, her overseas connections suddenly became very active. She closed several enormous deals in an incredibly short period. Contracts that normally took months or years were completed in just a week. Multiple ones at that. Everyone praised her. "Our madam is amazing. The chairman's judgment is impeccable." For months, Marcus vanished from the public eye. It seemed Helen had taken over the entire company. As I cleaned the kitchen, a sense of unease lingered. In the dining area, my mom wiped down tables. Rain began to fall outside, and then a familiar voice called out, "Is Haley here?" I froze. From the kitchen, I peered through the one-way glass. Marcus couldn't see me, but I saw him. He was soaked, his eyes red, as if he'd been traveling for hours. My mother, shocked, quickly masked her reaction and slammed a wet cloth on the table. "We're closed. Leave." "Please, Annie," Marcus said. His hair dripped with rain, his lips deathly pale. Why did he look so desperate? "You have the nerve to look for my daughter? Because of you, she's gone." "No, I don't believe it. I know she's alive," Marcus shouted, his chest rising and falling rapidly. I knew his heart condition was flaring up. Before our divorce, I had always reminded him to take his medication. Marcus had always maintained his composure, and his condition hadn't acted up in years. Helen probably knew about his health, but it was clear he hadn't taken his medicine in a long time. Now, his emotions had pushed him too far. "Stop pretending!" my mom snapped, though her concern showed as she fumbled for her phone to call an ambulance. I looked at the faint mark where my ring had once been. A bitter feeling welled up in my throat. What did this mean, Marcus? What did you want from me? It was in rain like this that he once rushed to meet Helen without hesitation. Now, through the glass, I watched his face twist with pain. I couldn't let him die here, could I? Taking a deep breath, I prepared to go out. But then a notification flashed on my phone. It was a message from an unknown sender. "Don't let him know you're alive." Confused, I opened it. The profile picture was Helen's. "Let's make a deal." As Marcus was taken away in the ambulance, his eyes remained fixed on the kitchen, filled with refusal to accept the truth. I gripped my phone tightly, staring at the enormous figure in the agreement. A wave of doubt stirred in me. "It's good you didn't go out. If he knew you were alive, he'd never let you go," my mom said, scornfully. "He really thinks his dirty money gives him the right to do anything." Watching her pace angrily, I couldn't help but laugh. In my earliest memories, she was always on the front lines, spatula in hand, facing life's storms. After my father cheated while she was pregnant, she had lost all faith in men. "What's so great about getting married, Haley? Stay with me, okay?" Perhaps her fierce, protective love had shielded me, making the first half of my love life smooth, until I met Marcus. When my mother realized I was set on marrying him, she once threatened to jump off the balcony to stop me. Years had passed since then, and streaks of gray now lined her temples. "Mom, let's leave this place and go back to our hometown. We can open a small restaurant together, just the two of us. What do you think?" The fiery woman who had been fuming with anger moments before suddenly smiled with joy. All right, a little restaurant, just the two of us. The money Helen offered was more than enough to start fresh. I wanted to use it to give my mother a peaceful, happy life. Helen hadn't anticipated my quick agreement. I thought you'd need time to think it over. You won't go and tell Marcus, will you? She asked, her voice suspicious. I chuckled bitterly. He wouldn't believe me. He only trusts you. Helen laughed too, her tone carrying hidden meaning. You're still too naive. I didn't understand her implication. According to our agreement, I just had to play along. Shortly after Marcus was hospitalized, Helen made a public appearance in our small town. Social media exploded with headlines like Helen's cross-country journey for love and Marcus risks his life for his ex-wife. Since their public declaration of love, Helen's fans enthusiastically supported their relationship. At the same time, they dug up a mountain of so-called dirt on me. When Marcus appeared at my place and ended up in the hospital, the online insults escalated into full-on harassment. Why can't this ex-wife stop causing trouble? Ugly people are always dramatic. The hateful comments kept pouring in, endless and vicious. Marcus, the center of it all, remained silent and out of sight. Scrolling through the malicious comments, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Click, click. I heard your chicken soup is amazing, Helen remarked casually. Marcus told you? No, the internet did. Helen sat in my mother's small restaurant, calm and at ease. She wasn't what I had pictured. Her confident presence and warm smile seemed contradictory. There was a vibrancy to her, a spark of life. Her leopard print nails caught the eye. You're just in this for the money, aren't you? She asked. Yes. We exchanged a knowing smile, both lowering our heads unintentionally. Do you really think Marcus loves me? She asked bluntly. That he sees me as some untouchable goddess? Her candor surprised me. Maybe he did, once. But people change. You think his family disapproved of your relationship? I asked. Helen's bitter smile lingered as she took a deep breath. Families like his always need a respectable excuse. Like you, I once loved him to the point of obsession. But on the day of our graduation, everything unraveled. Helen stood up, the sunlight streaming through the window illuminating her face. She turned and smiled softly. On the drive to the hospital, I was lost in thought. Helen chewed gum and played loud, heavy metal music. I've moved on. Why are you still stuck in the past? She rolled down my window, maybe worried I'd suffocate. At that party, Marcus handed me a drink for no reason, she said, as though telling someone else's story. When I woke up, it wasn't him beside me. It was one of his so-called best friends. She paused, her fingers drumming on the steering wheel. He knelt, crying, begging for forgiveness. Said he'd lost a bet on some gambling site. If I didn't agree to their terms, they'd cut off one of his fingers. Her voice was calm, the pain buried beneath years of healing. The memory had become a scar, numb but permanent. That incident created a rift between us, she continued. He hated me for it, but couldn't let me go. The warm wind from the open window carried her words. They echoed in my mind, bitter and hollow. Helen's heart-shaped keychain jingled softly, catching the moonlight and the hint of tears in her eyes. We were both learning to let go. At the hospital, Helen said, "You go in first. I'll join you later." I took the bowl of chicken soup, now cold, and hesitated before stepping out of the car. I wasn't sure I wanted to see him. When had this indifference set in? Even during our 10-year marriage, I'd quietly left hot soup by the bed every night, slipping under the covers, hoping he'd come home. The blurred red and green traffic lights outside clouded my vision. This time, he was waiting for me. As I pushed open the hospital room door, a memory resurfaced. Our wedding night. Marcus had been overjoyed by the bloodstain on the pristine white sheets. I'd hidden under the blanket, embarrassed. Now it made me feel sick. Didn't I say I don't want anyone here? Get out! Marcus shouted, his voice raw. He was thinner, barking orders without opening his eyes. I rarely saw him lose control. Helen's words rang in my head. You're his only weakness now. I hadn't believed her then, and now it felt absurd. Seeing him so frail and desperate was even more absurd. Silently, I began recording on my phone. I placed the soup on the bedside table and was about to sit when Marcus sprang up, grabbing the bowl and smashing it on the floor. Soup splattered everywhere. He froze, his eyes going blank as he stared at me. I was stunned. His eyes reddened, and he suddenly pulled me into a tight hug. Haley, I knew it. I knew you lied to me. I knew it. He clung to me, his sobs broken and childlike. Don't leave me. Please, I'm begging you. Don't go. Shocked, I patted his back awkwardly. All right, I won't leave. But first, you need to take your medicine. Marcus continued to sob, refusing to release his grip on me. I always took it with your soup. He whimpered. If I can't have your soup, I won't take it. His childish tone made me wince. I glanced at the mess on the floor, where the spilled soup had formed a sticky puddle. Making him another bowl right then wasn't an option. How about I see if the hospital has a family kitchen? I can cook you a fresh bowl there. At these words, Marcus clung to me even tighter, panic flashing across his face. His familiar minty scent stirred memories I didn't want to revisit. Don't leave, he begged. I'll take it. I'll eat it. He dropped to the floor, desperately scooping up the spilled soup with his hands, tears running down his face as he tried to drink it. I sighed, watching him. Maybe it was time for him to get a neurological assessment, or a psychiatric one, for that matter. Just as Marcus knelt on the floor, soup dripping from his mouth, Helen entered. Her face froze in shock. To make matters worse, one of her friends had accompanied her and witnessed the entire scene. Marcus, still clutching the broken bowl, looked stunned. Helen, why are you here? So he could tell us apart after all. Helen's eyes filled with tears as she rushed to the bedside, her voice trembling. Why is she here? You've been lying to me all this time. You've fallen in love with this stand-in, haven't you? Her tears flowed freely, her fragile appearance drawing instant sympathy. Helen, no, it's not what you think. Let me explain. Marcus stammered, scrambling to his feet and still holding the bowl, utterly lost. I nearly laughed out loud, but bit my lip and pinched my thigh to maintain a serious expression. According to Helen's plan, this was the moment I was supposed to leave the room, heartbroken. But before I could move toward the door, Marcus's words rang out like a thunderclap. Haley, let's get remarried. Years ago, Marcus's family had paid me handsomely to go abroad and remain silent. Helen admitted, I came back for revenge. Since that night, Marcus had been obsessed with purity. Meanwhile, she had discovered she could no longer have children. He'll never marry me, she said. He just likes pretending he's in love. As I left the hospital room, it felt like the boy with the minty scent from that rainy day a decade ago had finally vanished from my life. I thought you'd believe me. Why didn't you doubt what I said? Helen asked, puzzled, as we sat in a coffee shop. Her eyes were sharp and probing. You don't love him anymore, I replied. And neither do you, she shot back, letting out a dry laugh. Your mom must be a good person. I smirked and sipped my coffee. Can I ask for a higher price? Of course, name it. Marcus's company was practically hers now. The scandal involving Marcus and Helen at the hospital soon became a trending topic, though. Fortunately, my face wasn't shown. I skimmed the news, but didn't delve into the details. What did catch my attention was the dramatic drop in Marcus's family business stock. Helen mentioned that his family was now urging him to marry her. The same family that once strongly opposed her was now desperate for her approval. At home, my mom sat with her reading glasses on, enthusiastically browsing travel destinations on her phone. I want to go to the grasslands and ride horses. I want to go skiing. I've never seen snow, and the desert too. Do you think camels are aggressive? For days, she buzzed with excitement, planning trips through an app. Haley, when are we leaving? In about a week, I replied. Following Helen's instructions, I arrived at an abandoned factory. Why meet here? I asked. Because it's deserted. You'll understand once you're inside. A chill crept through me as I entered the empty space. The silence was unnerving. Just as I reached for my phone to call Helen, everything went black. When I came to, I was tied to a chair, my mouth taped shut. I couldn't make a sound. You're too naive, Helen said, emerging from the shadows, her voice dripping with venom. Fear gripped my chest. Sorry, but I told you, I'm here for revenge. She laughed maniacally. Picking up the agreement from a table, she tore it apart piece by piece. He doesn't love me anymore, and he won't be allowed to love you either. Her grin stretched unnaturally wide, her expression teetering on the edge of madness. This wasn't supposed to happen. Why was it going this way? Before I could process it, the factory doors slammed open. Stop! Marcus's voice cracked as he stumbled in, still wearing his hospital gown, his face filled with anguish. Tears streamed down my face. What was going to happen now? Marcus rushed toward me, but two burly men grabbed him and pinned him to the floor. Sign it, Helen ordered coldly. Sign it, and I'll let her go. Marcus struggled, glaring up at her with hatred. I owe you nothing. Why go this far? We paid you off back then. Wasn't that enough? His voice was firm, like he still believed he held the advantage. You should check the internet, Helen sneered, a tear rolling down her cheek. You think I care about my reputation? You leaked that video from back then, didn't you? The mention of the video and the ruined reputation made my stomach churn. My skin broke out in chills. So what? Marcus retorted. We're the same. In the distance, sirens wailed. Marcus's confidence returned as he smiled, certain of his victory. But then Helen pulled out a knife, pressing its cold blade against my throat. The sharp edge nicked my skin, drawing a thin line of blood. Are you out of your mind? Marcus shouted, his panic unmistakable. Helen's grip on the knife tightened, her voice chillingly composed. 3, 2. The icy finality in her tone made my blood run cold. Fine, Marcus yelled, hurriedly snatching the pen. As the sirens grew louder, he hastily signed his name on the document. The second he finished, the police stormed into the room. I felt my consciousness fade again, the stress finally overwhelming me. Why did you save me? I asked as Helen walked out of the police station, a bewildered expression on her face. Under the glow of the streetlights, her eyes sparkled. You lied to me, I said. There was lipstick on the blade. I'm not stupid. She laughed, then reached into her coat and handed me the real agreement. Here, take it. Oh, I met your mom, by the way, she said with a smile. She's a good woman. If I ever get the chance, I'd love to have your chicken soup again. Marcus had nearly destroyed Helen's career, but she didn't seem to mind. Her plan was to leave the country, using the large sum she'd secured to live a carefree life. I'm going to open a singing school, she said cheerfully. Teach a bunch of kids how to sing. All right, I believe you, I replied. Later, The doctor informed me that Marcus had been diagnosed with early onset dementia. From that day, the disease advanced quickly. Within a few days, he had already forgotten so much. The last time I saw him was in a park. A family servant had brought him out to enjoy the sunshine. Is that Haley? He asked, pointing a shaky finger at me. Zah. I smiled and leaned down to wipe the sweat from his forehead. What if we could go back to that rainy day? Wouldn't that be nice? Yes, yes, it would, I answered, my voice soft and distant. Helen, Haley, a beam of light, a rain shower. 2 days later, Mom, don't forget the sunscreen. Got it, she replied. The spirited little old woman stood in front of the mirror, her face lit up with a grin, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose.